you. So, before we start, and I can open this bottle, can I get a hands up? Who here works in or with a team? Okay, a lot of you. Who here leads a team? Keep your hands up. Okay, who manages a team? And then the last question is, who is responsible or involved with hiring? So this is odd to me that a lot of people work in teams and they're not, responsible for hiring because they have to work with these actual people. And this is what this talk is a little bit about. So who am I? My name is Noxie, or Jeroen. I'm the CTO, co-founder of Isset. I'm a senior developer. I like to build stuff. You can find me on Twitter. And I like cats a lot. So you might have heard all the annoying planes flying over this building, so you can't talk to each other when you're outside where it's hot. So a year ago, I was approached by a company, a big company, actually one of the biggest airports in Europe. I believe they're fifth at the moment. They do like 60 million passenger movements in a year, which is mind-blowing to me because in the Netherlands, where we are here now, there's 17 million people, so they move the entire country every year 3 times. That's kind of insane. So this company asked me to help them build them a new website. And the reason was, websites are not really a core competence or a core business for an airport. But they kind of discovered that this internet thing is kind of important. And, if you want to talk to your customers, you need to have it in-house instead of outsourcing everything. So they have like 200, 250 satellite sites all related to their airport. And they wanted to have them all under one wing. And the way they usually build something is they build a runway, which takes like 15 to 20 years. So they first make requirement documentation for 5 years. Then they go look for a company that's going to do that. That takes about 2-3 years. And then they have to order the stuff. And then after 20-25 years, they have a new landing strip, which is fine if you're an airport. But if you do that kind of thing with a website, that's kind of long. So they figured out that was not really how modern technology works. So they asked me to help them. One of the problems they had is that whenever a big news event happened, so last year we had the terrorist attack in Brussels, everybody goes to their website, pressing F5, seeing if their plane still leaves, if family is okay, etc., etc. So they have a huge spike in traffic every time a major event happens in the world. And to compensate for this, they have tons and tons of servers trying to manage this, which basically do nothing 99.99999% of the time. And they're pretty expensive. So this scaling part, I kind of know how to do that. So they told me, well, this is our problem, this is what we want to do. We want to build a new website, we want to change our presence on the internet, and we actually want to build the best digital airport in the world. Now, usually when you go to clients and they say, I want to build the best something, it just basically means I want to build something that's pretty cool and pretty decent. But they actually mean it. They win a lot of awards in all sorts of fields, and they really want to do this. So they allocated a lot of time and money to this to make it happen. So I was listening to this, and it sounded all pretty cool. And then they said, oh yeah, we don't really have a development team, so we kind of want you to build like 3 to 5 teams out of nothing. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know how the culture or the available work is in the rest of Europe or America or wherever you're from, but in here, I think I got 7 job offers when I went to the bathroom and back just now. So it's kind of hard to find people in the Netherlands. One of the biggest things that come up when you're looking for people, the first thing you think is, well, recruiters, maybe? But as developers in general, we don't really like recruiters. So I just finished this book, The Culture of Respect, by this guy, most of you probably know him, Cal Evans. And I mean, he has an avatar of a pirate, so he's absolute, legit. I mean, if you can get away with that, you can get away with anything. So I just read this book, and it was kind of triggered to me. One of the things it says is that companies that invest in the developer culture don't need recruiters. And I was like, yes, I don't have to deal with recruiters. So let's try to do this. Well, the first question I asked was, well, what is a culture? Because culture means different things for different people, right? So, for instance, this is Dutch culture. I'm pretty sure it doesn't resonate with most of you. So I looked it up, and every big talk should have a Wikipedia quote, so I thought this is a good place to put in mine. So a culture, according to Wikipedia, and I think it's kind of what I think as well, is a way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or an organization. It's pretty broad, but you kind of get a feel for what they mean. So then the question beckons, then what is a developer culture, right? So to me, a developer culture is basically a set of shared values about development. And, according to culture, a way of thinking, behaving, or working in a place of work or business, right? But this doesn't actually tell us anything about good or bad values. So if you have to work overtime every day, that's still a value. If your company says, well, everybody works 10 hours a day, that's still a value. And behavior is also not, done in a, if there's bad behavior in a company, that could still be behavior, that could still be the culture of the company. So what I'm interested in is, what is good developer culture? And according to me, you basically just put positive in front of anything, and there you go. So we have a set of shared values that simulate positive behavior. And we have a way of positive thinking, behaving, or working in a place of work or business. And then the last one is open communication. I'll get back to that later. So I'll keep talking about these values. So what are these mythical values? Well, basically, they're you. And I thought this was kind of aggressive, so to counteract that, I'll just have this in here. So values are a little bit of an odd thing. So they're not right or wrong, basically. It's you prefer something over something else, right? It's not black and white. It's not cold versus hot. It's just like every developer finds everything valuable. It's just we prefer some things over others. And I really like the way the Agile Manifesto does this, where they have a sense of values they think are more important than other values. It doesn't mean that they think everything on the right is not important. It's just that, for instance, they find working software more valuable than comprehensive documentations. So what I started doing was find what are the values of my team, basically. And I started out with a very small group, basically 3 people, so we shared 3 values. Our values came down to this. We want good atmosphere over negativity. So instead of the blame culture, which is rampant in a lot of companies, like, ha, you broke it, it's like, okay, something is wrong, what can we do to fix it, right? Try to think of positive outcomes instead of negatives. Learning over knowing. So there's a predominantly large population within a development company who thinks, or within a development community who think, okay, I know all this, I don't need to hear your side of the story. But it's actually very valuable to listen to another side of the story or another solution to maybe learn something new. Again, we try to think about working as a team instead of silos. So you have a lot of companies where people just, close themselves off for 2 weeks and then come out and like, I built this, and nobody has any idea how it works, but it works. And the last one that's very difficult to enforce is trust over checking. So we trust that whatever someone says he did or built or whatever, that it's correct, instead of trying to control it. We think these values are so important that they hang in our office, or they hang at the office. So now we have these core values, and I would like to urge you to try this out with your team. Get your team in a room, give them a piece of paper, give them a pen, ask them to write down 3 things they think are very important for development, and then mix and match. And you will see that a lot of conflict in your teams, and conflict, I don't mean that you beat each other half to death, but where people are arguing about stuff, is basically because you have different values. People value very good documentation, and other people are like, yeah, I just want to make it work, and that's okay for me. So again, this is not a good or bad thing, this is just what do you value more. So now we have these values, and I don't know, I'm a little older, so there used to be this movie, Field of Dreams, came out in 1989 with the very handsome Kevin Costner. And it's basically about a farmer in the middle of nowhere who gets stalked by a ghost, and the ghost keeps saying to him, go forth and build a baseball field, or a pitch, I heard today. It's apparently called a pitch. And the farmer was like, why would I do that? And the ghost kept saying, well, if you build it, they will come. And he was like, okay. So after being fed up with the ghost, keeps stalking him, he's like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to build it. So he built his entire pretty pitch, and that's basically what I did. And then I thought, okay, now every developer in the world is going to come to me. Don't do this. This is a horrible idea. This backfired very badly. But what we can learn from this is that the ghosts in the story could be a metaphor for people already working for the company or are in the vicinity of your company, telling other people how awesome your company is. This is how you want to try to get new people in, right? Because it's way more valuable if a friend of yours in a company says, hey, you should check out that company, they're pretty good. Instead of some recruiter saying, I've got the best job ever. Do you know Java? Yes? Okay, I got a JavaScript offer for you. So, one of the things I learned is that to cultivate a culture, pun intended, it takes time to grow, right? So, wow. So, a culture takes time to grow. But we didn't have time. I didn't have deadlines, but I needed to make moves. So the lucky thing was that in the company I worked for, they had something called money, and you can always throw money at a problem. And basically, you can buy, import culture from another, subject. So how do we do this? How do we find these people? Well, we defined what we find important in our values. So now we can talk to actual recruiters. And recruiters aren't bad, it's just that we don't tell them what we exactly want. And if you can tell them we want this exactly and they deliver, you can get good people. It's also very easy to shake out the bad recruiters, because if they don't give you what you want, you fire them. It's very easy. So, in my book, what works for me is typically there's two types of hiring. You have team hiring and you have person hiring. And team hiring is basically someone that will fit in the team, shares some or most of the values that the team has, and can just contribute to the team in a normal way. But there's some specific problems in the developer space that you need certain people to solve that problem. So if someone has a specific knowledge base, let's say he's very good with Vagrant or Varnish or Nginx, something like that, something that the rest of the team has no knowledge of, you do a person hiring. So you try to find someone that fills that gap of knowledge. And please stay away from rock stars and all that sort of stuff. So now we have a bunch of people, but we don't have a team yet, and we don't have a culture yet. So what we do is we create an environment. And basically the environment is like soil where you plant little seeds, and you give it a little rain and water, and you talk to them, maybe, play a little Bach, because they tend to enjoy it, or Justin Bieber if you're cruel. And hopefully it starts to grow. But just as with real crops, you can't really manage it, right? If you're a farmer and you have a field, you can't say, okay, we gotta deliver now. We gotta have mice now when you just planted it. So it has to grow. Which means that if you're a manager or a team lead in my case, your role changes. Instead of becoming you have to do this people, you gotta say, we're gonna try to help you become good. So this is what they call a facilitator. But this word is overused lately. So I kind of like to see myself more like this. You could say I'm an enabler, but that sounds a little bit druggy, so I'll keep it as this. So now we have a bunch of people. How do we keep them, right? Because what's them to go away and go to another company, which also has these awesome images? So what we try to do is make our developers happy. This is during a Christmas party, by the way. And you're like, yeah, but why should I care about happiness, right? Well, according to me, happy developers are over 9,000% more productive. And just like 78% of all the statistics, it is made up. But there's actually good research about this. Like in 2014, there's a research paper, you can read it. And it's not that happy developers or happy people produce more. They do, but in a different way. Or that if you have unhappy people, that they can't solve problems. They can't solve problems. It's just that happy people, in general, come up with better solutions. Which, to me, indicates that Taylor Otwell is amazingly happy. It's like insanely happy. So to keep these developers happy, what do they want, right? Is it money? Is it a gold necklace? Is it a cat? Turns out, in general, money is not a very good motivator for developers. If they have a certain amount of money that they feel comfortable, putting more at it just doesn't make them happier. What they actually want to do, and this might surprise you, they want to work. They want to solve problems. They want to solve puzzles, do something useful, make something productive. That's what I want to do. So in order for it to make it happen, what do they need, right? Well, the most important thing is they need an environment. And I don't mean a fancy office like all the startups do. I mean a safe environment where they can express themselves, where they can talk freely, where there's room to grow and there's room to fail. And the last one is very important because we have become so scared of failing that now it's like this really mythical, scary thing. While most good products start out as failures and just, iterate, and then become good. So your environment should facilitate this. Next up is tools. So with tools, I mean give developers good laptops, not decent laptops, good laptops. Give them multiple monitors, pay for their IDE if they use PHP Storm or something like that. Most importantly, let them choose. I mean, you as developers know what makes you productive. If it's PHP Storm, get them a license for that. If it's, Notepad, give them Notepad. After tools, they need tooling. And with tooling, I mean all kinds of peripheral solutions that can help us be more productive. And I think the Laravel ecosystem is incredibly powerful at this. There's so many good solutions for problems nowadays. We have Forge, Envoyer, Pusher, Sentry, you can name like dozens of them, and they all solve problems, make our lives easier. Developers also need good infrastructure. And with good infrastructure, I mean servers, I mean running on the latest PHP. There's nothing more frustrating to a developer who made something very, very amazing to have a host on a virtual machine running PHP 5.1. That's, the death of the project right there. And try to make your infrastructure part of your code base, so infrastructure as code. So use stuff like Ansible, Puppet, all those stuff. Chef, there's a bunch of tools like this. And then finally, automate as much as possible. Automation makes everybody's life so much easier. If it be continuous integration, continuous deployment, automated testing, automated build tools, automated documentation generation, just invest some time in all these options we have nowadays that make your life so much easier. So if you want to have more ideas, there's a guy called Jeff Atwood. Some of you may know him. He's one of the original builders of Stack Overflow. He came up with a Bill of Rights for programmers 10 years ago, in 2006. And there's a lot of good stuff in there, but it's kind of sad that 10 years later we don't, as a community or as an industry, adopted this already. I mean, this is 10 years, which is ages for our community. Okay, well, we don't only want to hire decent developers, we want to hire the best, right? We want to hire seniors, we want to hire people with experience. And it seems like they're never available, right? The senior people always seem to have a job and no one is looking. Well, actually, that's pretty logical. So the number of programmers doubles every 5 years, That means that at any time, half the world's programmers have less than 5-year experience. Now think about that. So if you want to find someone, it's going to be incredibly hard. So it's much easier to have the people you already have and level them up, right? Create your own seniors, create your own meteors, invest in them as developers. Obviously, it leads to the standard joke that a CTO and a CFO are talking, and the CFO says, yeah, but what if we invest all this money in and teach them, and they leave the company? And then the CTO says, well, what if they stay, right? So teaching and learning is immensely important. I think it's one of the key things in a successful team. It's all about learning. And there's basically, as a company, 2 ways you can achieve this. You can invest in time. One of the easiest ways is pair programming. You learn from each other while being productive. That's an easy way. But I like to have what they call a mentor or Padawan, where you have a senior person or a media person taking someone with them and explaining what they're doing. It's a much more effective way of trying to teach them stuff. There's a lot of other stuff to do. Like we have brown bag lunches, we have book clubs you can do, slideshow karaoke's, code katas, numerous stuff. One of them that stands out is code reviews, but to me code reviews should be mandatory. I think in any project of decent size there should be multiple eyes looking at the same code base, see if it's correct. So while it's helpful as a learning tool, I think it just should be always there anyway. The other thing you can do as a company to invest in your employees is basically money. So there's this amazing amount of good tutorials and good videos online that help you level up your team, right? So there's Jeffrey Way's Laracast for Laravel. We have Mitchell and Sean's Event Sorcery. We have Server for Hackers. So many, like a wealth of videos available that can help you and your team level up. Then there's stuff like this, right? A conference, the fact that you're all here to learn. So if you're here on your own merit and your company didn't pay for it, ask them why they didn't pay for it. It's basically investment. There's also stuff like meetups. Rafael Dams here has one of the biggest meetups ever in Europe, I think, anyway, in the Amsterdam PHP group, which gives a lot of opportunities to people starting out in the business to level up very quickly. And if you're a company and looking for people, hosting one is one of the most efficient ways to get your name out, to meet people, to show them this is how we do things, and if they're interested in it, they might join your company, right? Then there's obviously the workshops, like they were on Monday. They cost a little bit of money, but they're like 1 day intensive, in-depth knowledge of one topic. You can organize hackathons, you can do the Google Friday thing, so many options. What we do at my own company, we basically pay every subscription to a gym, because healthy people are usually more productive people. Also, they're less sick, so that's good for us. This is how we can level up our team. Another way we can help our team perform well is to try to steer them away from any forms of distraction. So one of the most provocative things I did was I killed all meetings, which management didn't like very much, so instead we tried to minimize the number of meetings. Now, a meeting for me, and you probably saw in the other room before here, has a very dubious nature, and I have a couple of rules about a meeting. So a meeting should have a clear goal. It should have a clear time box, and if the time's over, it's over, even if someone's still talking. Anybody should be able to leave a meeting. Anyone who is in a meeting and didn't contribute isn't allowed in the next meeting. Those are my rules. And they're very harsh, but they're very effective in my opinion. And if that doesn't work in your company, you can always just buy these at Amazon. Although I heard today, it shouldn't be in an email, it should be a Slack notification. So what else is there that distracts developers? Well, business politics distracts developers. The, hey, can I just ask you one little question thing, right? People sitting next to you on the phone, and basically anything related to an open office. So don't do that. So besides the distractions, we also have obstacles. And obstacles are usually when a developer doesn't get the right information or can find the person he needs, or, basically as a facilitator, you should be a bridge between you and whatever information they need to do their job. And then there's development practices. So the majority of development costs do not come from the time needed to write code. They come from the time needed to learn what's the right code to write. And this is true, very much so. So we have a couple of things to, counterbalance this. One is obviously agile methodologies. So Kanban, Scrum, all these types of things that, make a better project schedule, basically. And some of you may not like Scrum very much or Kanban. But I think the most essential thing about agile methodologies is that it's iterative. So you make something that kind of works, show it to a client, and if the client is happy with it, that it works, you go on, instead of making a feature for 2 months, and then the client's not happy, and then you wasted 2 months. So make little iterative processes and improve upon that concept. Another big one, especially for me lately, is domain-driven design. It's a way in which we talk to a client or a stakeholder, anyone that's in charge of making decisions. And we try to talk to the business to figure out, hey, what is it actually that you need, right? And we have tools and we have ways of doing that. And by talking to them in their language, we create a common knowledge base of what we know, what they mean if they say, I want an invoice. And we know, oh, that's that. And I want an accountability report, something like that. So this is what's called in domain-driven design the ubiquitous language. And I think it's one of the key factors in trying to understand your client. It's also the reason why, in my opinion, a lot of projects go wrong, because there's a lot of miscommunication, because just as culture means something for the person sitting on the left of you, it also means something different to the person to the right of you. So if there's this much disambiguity, how can you, make the right thing? There's another trend lately called event storming. It's where you just basically try to map out the process of a feature or a site, something like that. It's very powerful. I would really advise you to look into that and just, see if it applies to you. But basically what it all comes down to is this. It's all about communication. All these different methodologies, all these different trends, they all try to solve this problem, the communication problem. Okay, so now we have a bunch of happy developers. Do we have a team now? Well, we can't actually build a team. We can only grow a team, and that takes time. And what I mean by that is, if you have the 11 best football players in the world, and you put them all in a team, and you make them do like a tournament, like World Championship, I'm pretty sure they won't win. They might be individually very, very good, but it's the process of working together that makes a team powerful. Else, why would you work in a team, right? So the only thing we can do is make this soil that we planted as fertile as possible, give them all the opportunities to grow, and hopefully something successful will come to that. So even though I call myself an enabler, I'm basically just a gardener. It's basically what I do all day. And there's a few things you can do as a gardener to improve the soil. And one of them is act on trust. So try to give your team the power and the trust that whatever they're doing is going to be okay. So instead of micromanaging them, just let them be. I think the most important part about this is that managers have as a job to manage risk. So if a manager manages people, then the people are the risks. And that means that he doesn't trust his people, which is very toxic to me. The next thing you can do is set clear, defined goals. Just as we try to be as clear and explicit about requirements, Try to tell your team what you expect of them, what the deliverables are, what the time path is, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, stuff like that. Also try to steer a little bit, not directly, during feedback rounds where you said, well, we promised you would do this, but actually you did that. That's not what we promised, right? And try to set a high standard. Because if you do a high standard, it will always go down a little bit, so you end up being a decent standard. Well, if you are okay with a decent standard, it goes down a little bit, and you have a horrible standard. And basically, gardening is just rinse and repeat. Just do this over and over again. And it kind of fits into what I call self-organizing teams. So basically, I give the team their own responsibility to do whatever they think is necessary to solve the problem. We empower the engineers to do their own infrastructure, build their own thing on top of that, try to solve the problems in their own way. And in order to do that, you need the support from the entire organization. Because else you're just being subversive, and if people ask you what are you doing, and I say I have no idea what my team's doing, and they ask me why not, and I say this is just the way it is, and they don't know this, they're going to be very angry. So, one thing about teams is within a team there's team dynamic, right? And team dynamic follows the teaming model, and I'm not sure everyone is familiar with this, so let me go over it. So teaming model basically says there's 4 stages of a team. There's forming. Forming is when we put the team together, everybody high-fives each other, everybody's happy with each other, because nobody knows each other. Then there's storming, and basically that means that you start working with each other, and the dude you shook your hands with is actually not very likable to you, and you disagree about a lot of things. He stabs your spaces, you know, he's Vim, you're Emacs, this kind of stuff. This takes a while to settle in, right? During the storming phase, it's basically what animals do as well. They sniff each other out and try to figure out who's who and what's what. After that period, there comes a norming stage. So everybody knows, he's the Emacs guy, he's the Vim guy, we're not going to discuss this, it's just the way it is. But only after norming, we get performing. So we have to go through 3 stages before the team actually performs, which is kind of a large investment. So this theory was originally wrote up by Bruce Tuckman somewhere in the 80s. And he said, if you have a performing team, usually you people notice that if you tell a colleague like half a sentence, like, hey, you have to do the thing for the thing, they immediately know what you're talking about. That's performing. And this also means that teams are immutable. So every time you change someone in the team, you have to go through all the phases again, from forming to storming to norming, which is very detrimental to your performing. And actually, we had this at the company, where you can see clearly in the beginning we had forming, norming, storming, and we were up to performing until we changed the teams, and then it had to start all over again. Now, we give all these teams a lot of room. We give them a lot of space. We try to facilitate as best as we can. The offside of that is they should be accountable. So we have to tell them what they did wrong and why. There's a very good book about it, The 10-Minute Manager. Anyone who leads a team, I strongly suggest you read that. Accountability does not mean that people get fired. It's okay to fail. It's just we have to find a solution or a way to make this not happen again. Because that's also iterative, right? We have to iterate the process as well. So learn and adapt while you're doing this. If you don't do that, you end up with this kind of burn down chart, right? And it basically just looks like a waterfall. And this is what Frank de Jong likes to call a waterboard. This is not what iterative process is. This is last-minute delivery. So there's a few things you can do for a team to make them perform better. There's always motivation. You can say, well, let's do this, guys. If we do, this amount of points, we all go to Disneyland. Something like that. We have to make the team members involved. So they should be responsible and feel responsible for what they're delivering and what they're doing. if they feel a deep connection with the product they're making or the project they're doing, they're going to do their best to make it good. And as I mentioned before, you have to give feedback rounds. This should also be iterative, and it should not be that you say, well, you did this wrong, or you did that wrong. It's just that we have to figure out in a positive way, okay, this was not the best solution, how can we fix that? And then there's one thing I like to call managing by walking around, which I do a lot. Is basically I walk around and do nothing, which kind of sounds like a dumb idea or a great idea. The idea behind it is that as a manager, team lead, or anyone responsible for the team, you should not be in an ivory tower. I've seen a lot of companies where the person responsible for the team is off in some other office or on a different floor or a different country, which is kind of, with remotes, that's okay. So managing by walking around basically means I'm available for you if you need anything, have any questions. Remember, we're facilitators. We try to help our teams, right? So managing by walking around is basically saying, if you need anything, just come up to me. And it's all not businessy things, right? It can also be the little things. So for Christmas, I bought everyone a rubber duck so they can do rubber ducking. And that was, it's a little gesture, but it's an appreciation from the management. So if you would like to do something like this, become an advocate yourself. Just remember when you do this, it's not always about work. It's more about people. We're in the people business, all right? So, in the end, after my experiment, what did we gain? We got happy developers. We got very high quality output. We got very, very trustworthy teams. We got a sense of pride within the teams. They were proud of what they delivered, proud that it worked, proud that they did it themselves. There was nobody telling them you have to do it this way. They just figured it out themselves. And we got the hiring sort of kind of solved. We got a lot of people from the community hearing about this use case and coming up to us and saying, hey, I want to check this out. Can I go on an interview with you? Which meant that we were not reliant on any form of recruitment anymore, just as Cal Evans told us. And they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so this was one of the last sprints they did. This was my talk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to rate me.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I have a question. Have you ever come across with a member of the team that thinks he knows everything, that what he's doing is the right way? Oh, sorry. No, but how do you convince or make to see that person that it's actually about the whole team and not as individuals?
So your question is, how do you convince someone who thinks of himself that he knows everything that he doesn't think that anymore, basically?
Yeah, like trying to make that person to...
Well, usually what I do is I talk to them, and I have I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on a lot of things, but I have a wide variety of topics that I have like basic knowledge of. So I just ask them questions about like some very far out subject and ask them, okay, what do you think of this? And if they have no idea what I'm talking about, that proves my point that they don't know anything. Another trick is you can send them to a conference. Usually, if they go back from a conference, they're like, I did everything wrong I ever did. So that always helps. Yeah, just sending them to something where they're forced to learn, so like a workshop, for instance, that's always very handy. Or sending them maybe to a conference, like if you're a PHP developer, and most of you are probably object-oriented developers, if you send them to, let's say, a functional programming conferences, I'm pretty sure he will find out that he doesn't know anything. That's what I would do, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, partially. Thanks.
Okay, if you have more questions, come after me, come after the talk, ask me. You do realize if you don't have questions, you can, oh no, not drink beer, there's one more. Okay,
Is this working? Yes. One more question. How do you deal with information keepers? For example, first guy in a startup hired here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm looking
Okay,
into the
stand
light,
up.
so I don't see anything.
For example, one of my issues is I have an employee who's like the first hired guy of the company. You know, he was like first man in the startup. He sits on every detail, every piece of information, and he's not sharing. I sit down with him. I sit in his office. I try to talk with him, and it's like dragging information out of him. He's also an introvert. Don't know how to crack it.
So if I understand correctly, how do you deal with someone that pulls all the work to him and keeps it to himself, basically?
Exactly. The thing is, I think he's kind of afraid that if you look into his work, you will criticize him, or
Yeah.
he will not have the power, or
Okay.
maybe he feels not needed anymore. I have absolutely no idea.
So in general, I would say that code review should be mandatory in any project. So code review should solve this. But you can tell him about the bus effect, right? So if he goes on holiday, if he's sick, if he gets, God forbid, driven over by a bus, all that knowledge is gone. So one of the things that a team excels at, whereas if you work alone, you lose that, is like shared knowledge. So I went away for a year from my company to do this. And my company kept on going the whole time I was gone. If I was in a position that I had all this knowledge that only I knew about the company, I could have never done this. I could just walk away from my company and everything went smoothly because most people in my company knew, you know, anything they needed to know without me being there. So that's a very powerful way of making yourself dispensable, which maybe you don't want, but you know, I think it's professional to be that way. Does that answer your question at all? Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I've recently become a team lead.
Yeah.
And does it matter if one of your team members doesn't share your general outlook on development?
So you're asking if you as a team lead have a different way of wanting to solve a problem than someone in the team?
It's more of a sort of general outlook of how you approach development as a thing.
Do you mean on the architectural level?
Okay, I'll try and put it. So I'm a Laravel background.
Yeah.
And the chap I'm talking about has a WordPress background. Therefore, there's quite a...
Okay. Let's choose my word carefully. So, I used to be very strict about these kinds of things, but I've really mellowed out, and in the end, I kind of feel that it doesn't really matter what solution you use, as long as it's adaptable, changeable, iterative, and easy to fix if it seems that it's not the right decision, then sure, do whatever. But I kind of have a hard feeling seeing how WordPress would be a very sustainable, easy changeable solution, but I have no very good insights into the WordPress ecosystem at all. I would say that Laravel fits all those bills, so that's a safe choice. Other than that, I don't really know. Maybe you can come talk to me after, and if you give me a little bit more context, I might have a better solution for you. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
How would you combine the immutable teams with the Padawan system? Because when I think you want to grow your developers, but yeah, you also want to grow like the non-experienced teams to get better. How would you combine those two?
I would value the Padawan system more because if you can level up a few members of your team, that will have compound interest basically. So the sooner you get people up to a certain level where you can just leave them alone and they can do what they do best in a way that's acceptable to you, the more efficient it will be, in my opinion. But yeah, there are growing pains. If you grow quickly, as we did, it's hard to find, how do I say this? So I tried during interviews, so a little context, I did about 150 interviews in 2 months, which is kind of bad. I try to not hire anyone under a certain level just because I didn't have the time to do a Padawan system with them, because we had to make, actual moves. If I would have had more time, I might have just have onboarded a few. We had 2. I might have done more. So we had the manpower and the time to level them up, basically. But it's a very powerful tool. So if you're in the position that you can do this, I would definitely recommend it. Does it help answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
One final question, really quick one.
Okay.
What would you say is a good, the perfect size of a team?
So there's this theory about the number. I didn't put in the slide because it's kind of controversial, but there's a theory about the amount of communication lines you as a human being can actively have. So I believe in small teams because there's less noise, less overhead. So the simple formula goes like this, right? If I have some piece of knowledge and I have 2 team members, I have to share it with 2 team members. If I have 100 team members, I have to share it with 100 team members. That's a lot of, chitter chatter, extra savings. So I think the study says that somewhere between 6 and 8 persons is like the maximum you should grow a team. We did, let me count. So we did 2 backenders, 2 frontenders, a tester, UX design, and yeah, that was it. So 7? Yeah, seven in a team, and we had 3 of those. But as with anything, it kind of depends, I guess. Yeah, so for me, small teams work, but I know a lot of companies that have 50 people in there. I don't know how they do it, but yeah, I like smaller teams better. But it might depend on your mileage, to be honest. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Okay. So I think we're done. Okay. So. Thank you very much. If you're interested in any of the subjects I talked about, I have a list of references where I got most of this from. Go look it up. Thank you.